on the Journal.
Where does Germany go from here? After 40 years of Cold War, the radical changes in East Germany could reshape Europe. Does the West fear a united Germany? Will the Soviets allow it to happen? What the future holds for Germany and the world, coming up on the Journal.
But the party is still going on, and Claude Adams is there right at the Berlin Wall. Claude?
Peter, the scene here on the western side of the Berlin Wall near the Brandenburg Gate is really quite extraordinary. West Germans have climbed up on a section of the wall. They're standing about 10 deep, looking over on the other side at soldiers on the other side. They're cheering, they're taking photographs, they're popping champagne corks. It's a party scene that's going to go on the whole evening. Berlin is still technically a divided city, but standing here at the Brandenburg Gate, you'd never know it.
The opening up of the Berlin Wall has implications that go far beyond East Germany. Since 1961, the wall's been the tense dividing line between the major powers of East and West. Warsaw Pact countries lined up on one side, NATO countries on the other. The Journal's Alan Abel looks at the history and the symbolism of East Germany's Great Wall.
We call it the Berlin Wall, but in fact it is as long as Germany itself, a serpentine of cement and steel stretching 1,400 kilometers from the Baltic Sea coast to the Czechoslovakian frontier. For 15 years after World War II, the largest city in Germany was occupied, but not barricaded, and 3 million East Germans walked or rode to the west. But in August of 1961, with the flood of immigrants reaching 2,000 a day, Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev accepted the pleas of the East German government. He authorized the laying of coils of barbed wire along Berlin's boulevards and streets. Almost immediately, the barrier became the emblem of the Cold War, the most visible symbol of the chasm dividing East and West.
July the 25th, Kennedy addresses the nation.
In Berlin, as you recall, he intends to bring to an end, through a stroke of the pen, first, our legal rights to be in West Berlin, and secondly, our ability to make good on our commitment to 2 million people of that city. That we cannot permit.
Western leaders heralded West Berlin, surrounded by communist territory, as a lone beacon of liberty in a darkened sea. For more than a quarter century, the Berlin Wall not only cut a city in half, but in our consciousness, it divided the world. It was a place of intrigue and danger, the stuff of spy novels.
Got a man coming over tonight. It'd mean a great deal if we could get him out. He's got papers, if the papers are any good.
And it was a place of dramatic reality, as when Soviet dissident Anatoly Sharansky walked to freedom across divided Berlin. Over the years, the two Germanys were able to negotiate some breaches in the barrier. Family visits, temporary permission for elderly East Germans to go to the West, and thousands of Third World refugees funneled westward, part of a long journey from Africa and Asia. And yet, to the hardline communists in East Berlin, and to hardline Cold Warriors on the other side, the wall stood firmly, a man-made canyon of distrust. In its 29th year, the Berlin Wall seemed to be a permanent fixture of European life and politics. Then suddenly today, without tools or dynamite, the wall was in a way demolished. And if the East Germans are stunned by this, so are the governments of the Western Alliance. They're watching the demolition of Europe's balance of power, and they seem as surprised and unprepared as they were when the wall was built. I'm Alan Abel.
East Germany's decision to open its border raises a lot of questions. Could this be the first step toward reunification of the two Germanys? How will this new relationship affect the rest of Europe? And how will the superpowers, especially the Soviet Union, react to all these changes within the communist bloc? To help sort through the questions just beginning to emerge, two experts on European politics. In Washington, Robert Hunter, Director of European Studies at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and in London, George Shopland, a specialist in Eastern European politics at the London School of Economics. Professor Shopland, let's begin with you. How amazing a day has this been for Germany?
Oh, I think it's a pretty stupendous day.
It effectively means that the reunification of Germany is now very much on the agenda, and the Berlin Wall, which has been there since 1961, is something that's just a physical presence now, and I suspect not even that for very much longer.
Professor Hunter, how does this look from where you sit?
I think this is one of the most important days since about 1945 in terms of European history. This means, in effect, that the East German communist regime will start unraveling, and I suspect in a matter of months we will see, in effect, the progressive end of communism in Eastern Europe.
Do you agree with that, Professor Schaufflin? Do you think that both the call for free elections and the symbolic end of the wall means the end of that regime?
Oh, that part I certainly agree with. I'm not sure if I agree that it'll be as rapid as that. But yes, the moment they have free elections in Germany, the communist system will be voted out. I think they'll be lucky, the communists, to get 15–20% of the popular vote.
So are you even wondering if Egon Krenz himself can survive, if he can steer these waters?
Oh, my own guess is that Krenz will not survive that long. I think that the East German party is resorting to desperate measure after desperate measure to somehow stay afloat. And I think Krenz is part of the ballast that they're going to throw over, and it's going to happen fairly soon, I would guess.
Professor Hunter, if things move as quickly as you predict, are there risks inherent too?
Oh, there are tremendous risks. We don't know whether Krenz will be overthrown by his own people. We don't know whether this will prove in the Soviet Union to be too much for those people who already have doubts about Mikhail Gorbachev. And we also have to understand that this tremendous political change is also taking place in that part of the world that is the most heavily armed, not just with conventional, but also with nuclear weapons. One doesn't have to craft a scenario for danger to recognize that hope and problems go together here.
But what could happen? What are you suggesting?
Well, if this proves in the Soviet Union to be too much for those people around Gorbachev, he could be forced to reverse himself. Now, the price would be immensely high with the promise of free elections and the like. You would not see what we saw in Tiananmen Square with a single crackdown and limited bloodshed. The price of reversing this would be incredibly high. For the rest, you just never know with so many people in the streets, so much happening, so much, I'm sure, discontent among elements of the East German leadership, whether somebody will do something really stupid.
Professor Schaufflin, is that a fear for you, too, the limits of Soviet tolerance? After all, they've got, what, 400,000 Soviet troops in that country? This has been their border for years with the Western Alliance.
Not only that, I mean, this is a territory which is their great prize from the Second World War. Now, I don't think the Soviet Union is going to give up East Germany just overnight. I think if there is reunification or moves towards reunification, it'll come gradually, and it'll almost certainly come in a period of much greater fluidity than we have now. We're at the beginning of a completely new era in Europe. I'm quite persuaded of this. And various security guarantees will have to be given by and to the Soviet Union that the process will not infringe its security interests in any sense.
And could those security interests include that East Germany must stay in the Warsaw Pact, for example? What if they want to leave?
Well, I suspect...
And what would unification require them to do, if not leave?
I think that I see the Warsaw Pact remaining in being for some considerable time yet. But you see, we already have a situation where you don't have to be a communist country to be a member of the Warsaw Pact. That's what Hungary is these days. I can see a situation where the GDR pays some lip service to communism, but in reality is no longer the kind of fully committed Warsaw Pact member that it has been hitherto.
Professor Hunter, can we move along now to the challenge for the West? Is there some fear about unification, what that would mean? Some fears within NATO councils tonight, for example.
Well, I think that there have been in recent months, since the so-called German problem reemerged, a good deal of fear expressed by the French, by many Americans, other Europeans, even some Germans. But I think people are now coming to realize that even the addition of another 16 million Germans to the Federal Republic probably isn't going to pose that much of a problem. After all, if Mikhail Gorbachev can sit still for what happened today, why shouldn't we in the West be more positive?
But I'm sorry, I didn't mean the economic challenge. I mean the political challenge. and also what a unified Germany would mean, for example, within the European community?
Well, in the first place, in my judgment, this cannot happen until we do transform the two military blocs. And what we have now, one of the dangers is massive political change, but not much change militarily. Now, if I think about the fears people do have, justified or not, of Germany, and I say, what's the best way to have a unified Germany be effective, it would to see the Single European Act, this thing called Europe 1992, as a geostrategic concept. Namely, let us make sure that West Germany firmly and forever is embedded in the West. Then if we were to add East Germany to it, frankly, I don't think that would be much of a threat to anyone.
Professor Schauffele, what about you? Do you see this as a challenge to the West as well?
Oh, I think it's undoubtedly a challenge, but in many ways it's a very positive challenge. After all, this is what Europe has been, I think in a sense, dreaming of since 1945, since the division of Europe, the potential to reunify the continent. No one says the process is going to be easy. There are, of course, going to be major structural problems in having a very powerful Germany, a politically and economically powerful Germany, which is going to be much larger than any other European country other than the Soviet Union. Of course, there are problems, and old attitudes are going to have to change, some of them quite radically. But I think that it's well worth doing. No one said it's going to be easy.
I want to end on predictions. Professor Schauffele, do you see integration sooner than unification? I mean, how quickly could this go?
It's going very rapidly. I would say a very close relationship between the two German states, but still separate, is now, I think, feasible within the next 12 months. Integration to confederation or something like that is something which I think is 3 to 5 years away, and quite conceivably some form of reunification, certainly by 1999, within the next 10 years.
And your timetable, Professor Hunter?
I think it's going to take quite a bit of time to sort out the larger European security dimension along with the political change we're seeing. So I would set the year 2000 as a good timetable and a goal for trying to transform this system into something that, as Professor Schauffele has said, we have dreamed of since the last war.
I thank you both, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks for being our guest.